Power BI measures. If you're not sure when to use one, how to use one, we're going to walk through that in this video. But don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're going to cover things like Power BI, Excel, other tools, and more importantly, how to use your data all in the time it takes for you to grab a cup of coffee. So a key thing to remember when we're talking about Power BI measures is that they are highly dynamic aggregations of data. And what that means is that they move as you move the data. So if you click on a graph one way, your measure will update for that graph. So that's part of why a measure is so powerful. So because the measures are done on the fly from Power BI, it's very, very flexible, but they're not stored anywhere. So they are literally calculated each time that something is updated on the report that you're looking at. And this also means that they use your CPU of your computer versus RAM. Might be too much for you today, and we'll cover that in another video. So one of the cool things about measures is that it calculates them on the fly, and they call it context. And basically, it's whatever filter you have on the screen impacts the measure. So it's really dynamic and a very powerful tool for making your analysis work for you. Let's dive into Power BI and see what we can get into. And it's just a simple data set that I pulled from some pandemic case counts by country, continent, country, case counts, and population data as of 2019. Down here at the bottom, there's a total, and that is actually a measure. But if you're familiar with looking at fields, there isn't a measure named that. It's kind of one of those automatic things that Power BI does for you, but we want the good kind of measure that'll let us do some more fun. Let us add a measure. So there's a couple ways to do it. And as a matter of fact, anytime you're doing anything in Power BI, there's a lot of different ways to get where you need to get. There are things up in the ribbon under the home menu where you have measure. I generally like to click over here and right click and add my measure. If you're messing around with Power BI and you have more than one table, it drives me nuts, but if I don't have the right table highlighted, it will add the measure to a different table perhaps and does some different things I'm not expecting. So to keep my sanity, I prefer to do it this way. And then what it does, it's kind of sneaky. It adds a bar up here at the top that isn't always obvious. So the measure is the name of it on the left of the equal sign. So we're going to say just total cases. And what I'm going to do here is just add total cases regardless of the country. We have a calculating the sum of the cases for all the data. Now I've got the table highlighted. I'm going to click on the total cases. So that new measure I created now has a calculator next to it, and I can interact with it just like I can every other data component that is in the data model. So I click on that and you'll see it's the same number all the way down. And that number matches what's over here. So now I've got a measure that I can play around with, and I'm going to add a card. And I'll hit that total cases and it pops it in. So we're at 66 million cases. You can always play around. And let's say I click on France, that 66 doesn't change. However, if I throw this over here and I do cases, so we have a separate card. It's 2 million cases, which is the France count. So this automatically changes as I go. But this measure, we can also make them static. So that's really how to create a measure, and you can play around with it just like you can every other data element available to you through your data set. So if you find that when you're creating your measure that it's just taking too long to update, you might be out of the depth of what you should be doing here in a measure, because remember, it's using that CPU. So there's another option, and that's the creating a calculated column, and I'll link to a video here in the card, whichever direction that is. And also, if you need a cheat sheet for when to do either of these functions, I'll have a link to that on the blog. It's just a quick cheat sheet on when you're going to create a column or use a measure. So don't forget to subscribe for some more data analytics tidbits. I really want to make this helpful for you, so leave it in the comments if you have some suggestions on things that you want to know about in the time it takes for a cup of coffee.